Welcome again to Anatomy and Physiology Screencast. In this video, we'll be taking a look at connective, muscle, and nervous tissue. The objectives for this unit have actually changed a little bit. We're going to focus on the cutaneous membrane, serous and mucous membranes, and also the synovial membranes a little later when we talk about the musculoskeletal system. So we're going to focus not only on the different types of connective tissue like cartilage, bone, blood tissue, and connective tissue proper, but also the muscular, nervous tissues and the differences between nerves and neuroglia. So let's start with connective tissue, which binds tissues together. It has a protective and supportive function. So it fills spaces, it's a framework for other cells and structures, stores fat, makes blood cells, has a role in infection, and repairs tissue. And there's always three major elements to connective tissue. You'll see fibers, you'll see cells in those fibers, and all of that will be held in non-cellular matrix material. Connective tissue is completely vascular except for cartilage. The different types of connective tissue are bone, which is also known as osseous tissue, cartilage, and there are three types: hyaline, fibrocartilage, and elastic cartilage; dense connective tissue, which is referred to as proper CT or connective tissue. So dense regular refers to tendons and ligaments. Dense irregular refers to something like the dermis of the skin. And then connective tissue that's elastic refers to ligaments and blood vessels. So they have to be stretchy. Loose connective tissue is the other type of proper connective tissue, and it may be areolar, full of fat, which is adipose, or reticular. We're not going to take a look at reticular this time. Blood as well is vascular and is a type of connective tissue. So the main types of connective tissue fibers that you're going to see mentioned again and again are collagen, which is made of collagenous, which is made of a protein collagen, and that is found mostly in bones, tendons, and ligaments, and also the stretchy, flexible, elastic fibers, which is made of the protein elastin, and those are found in the ears and vocal cords of the human body. Bone, which is referred to as osseous connective tissue, is very, very hard, and it's the hardest connective tissue because there's mineral salts and also the protein collagen is inside the matrix. Bone has a lot of blood vessel running through it, believe it or not, and because there's so many blood vessels, it's easy to repair bone, and it also demands a lot of oxygen, and that repair demands even more. Bone has a supportive function in the body, and it's also a place for muscles to attach. Bone is also the place where you find stem cells to make different types of blood cells. And bone is made by special cells called osteocytes. Remember, osteo refers to bone, cytes refers to cells, so these are bone-forming cells that lie in little beds referred to as lacunae and are arranged in concentric circles called lamellae. So here's a nice picture of bone, and you can take a look at where bone cells begin, and here's where the blood vessels actually come through. And we'll take a look at this a little bit later in the skeletal system. Cartilage is very, very rigid, and it is avascular, so that's what makes it special than the others. Because there's no blood vessels through it, it heals slowly. It's made by cells, cartilage cells, called chondrocytes that are in little beds in a gel matrix. There are three types of cartilage: hyaline, and that's the most common, and that's the end of the bones for cushioning and the respiratory passages. Elastic cartilage has elastic fibers, and that's the external ears and the larynx. And fibrocartilage is the type of cartilage that is tough, and it's found between your vertebra, your knees, and it's in your pelvic girdle as well. Hyaline cartilage, like I mentioned earlier, is found at the ends of bones. Looks a little like this. Elastic cartilage is found in the external ears and larynx, and there's a good picture right here. Notice somewhat repeating structure it looks like, and looks a little like that. Fibrocartilage, like I mentioned, is between the vertebrae, and this, when we talk about a slip disc, this is what we're referring to. somebody has a slip disc, that means that that fibrocartilage disc that is between the vertebra has moved. And this is also the type of cartilage that you find in the knees. And when we dissect the knees, you'll get to see a little bit more of that. Now we go on to actual fibrous connective tissue. So there's dense and loose, and fibrous connective tissue of the dense kind consists of densely packed collagen fibers. It's really strong, and it doesn't have too many blood vessels running through it. So this is part of your tendon system and ligament system. So tendons are muscle to bone attachment, and ligaments are bone to bone attachment. And again, when we take a look at the knee, you'll get a little bit more of a good feeling about what this looks like. So I want to call your attention to a particular cell, because we've been talking about collagen a lot and elastin as well. The types of cells that are associated with secreting these types of fibers are referred to as fibroblasts. And if you take a look at the picture up here, you can see the fibroblast cell encased in the matrix of collagen. And then you could see that here, collagen as well, all of this. And also elastic fibers made from the protein elastin. Loose connective tissue is also known as areolar tissue, and it's very common, found in the digestive tract. It's delicate and thin, and or rather what produces delicate thin membranes that bind things together, bind body parts, and the fibers may run in all types of different ways, different orientations. This loose connective tissue, or areolar tissue, is also made of collagen and elastin. So here's a good representation of the different orientations that loose connective tissue looks like. And here are the cells that are most likely responsible for making all those fibers. Okay. Feel free to stop the video so you can take a look at any of these, which you will see again for an assessment. Connective tissue cell types. So other than fibroblasts, which we took a look at a few minutes ago, there's also mast cells, which are cells that are mast cells prevent clots by releasing a chemical called heparin, which is an anticoagulant, stops clots from forming, and mast cells also release histamine, which maybe you've heard of antihistamines, but histamines actually increase inflammation. So something happens in connective tissue, mast cells will come and save the day by preventing clots from forming and starting an inflammation response. Macrophages, as you know, or as you may know, are white blood cells, and they actually travel around all this matrix, scavenging and defending against infection and looking for foreign substances. Fibroblasts, I also wanted to tell you a little bit about the homeostatic mechanism of fibroblasts. So scurvy is something you may have heard of, sailors getting scurvy in long trips, and that refers to, the condition scurvy refers to lack of vitamin C. And that lack of vitamin C prevents fibroblasts from doing their full job. So that lack of vitamin C will prevent fibroblasts from making collagen correctly, or in the amounts that are needed in the body. This is an example of a fibroblast. Fibroblasts have star-shaped bodies, and you can take a look at all the organelles that you learned about in the last unit. Here are plasma cells, which are also found in connective tissue, and this is a mast cell with little granules of the histamine inflammatory chemical, and these are mast cells as well. This is what they really look like. So these are two pictures side by side, two representations of how this all works together, especially with the epithelium layer that you learned about in the last few videos. So here's the epithelium, and you can tell where the epithelium stops with the basement membrane, sometimes referred to as the basal lamina. Here's some macrophages. So those white blood cells just roaming around trying to look for foreign invaders. Here's some fibroblasts that are responsible for making those fibers, elastins, elastic fibers, and also collagen. So here's collagen right here, elastin right here. Here's elastin right here, and collagen right here. You'll also see mast cells, and they're not in here. Fat cells as well in this matrix in the background, and plasma cells. Adipose tissue, which is, let me go back just for a second, take a look at this fat cell. So when a bunch of fat cells are together and they're connected, you end up with adipose tissue, and this is loose connective tissue. It stores fat droplets, okay, so lots of lipids, and the function for adipose tissue is to pad organs, to cushion, to insulate. Blood tissue is made of cells. Blood is a tissue. Yes, it looks liquid, but it's actually made just like any other tissue, made out of cells that have similar job, function. And it's made of cells, red and white, in a liquid matrix, which is plasma. Excuse me, I should have added the S here. The function of blood is to transport nutrients and gases, and we'll talk a little bit more about blood in the cardiovascular unit. So this is a good representation and diagram of the number of white blood cells versus red blood cells in the plasma background. In this chart, it actually shows the type of cells, the types of cells that are involved in making the different types of connective tissue. So let's starting on the left, we end up with proper connective tissue proper, that's what it's referred to, and that's loose and dense. And it all starts with fibroblasts, which are the progenitor cells of fibrocytes, which are the fiber cells. In cartilage, which you end up with the three types of cartilage we talked about, chondroblasts are the major stem-like cell, and chondrocytes are the cells that are responsible for making the cartilage itself. In bone, osteoblasts are the progenitors to osteocytes, which are the cells, again, responsible for making the bone tissue. And blood, we refer to as hematopoietic stem cells, and those go on to be red blood cells and white blood cells. Now going on to 5.5 muscle tissue, we're going to talk about three different types of muscle tissue: skeletal, smooth, and cardiac. So muscle cells are also called muscle fibers, and the big deal about them is that they can contract. So these three types, skeletal, smooth, and cardiac, are found in different places and are pretty easy to tell apart. Skeletal muscles are attached only to bone, the skeleton. They have striations, which are patterns on them, and they are voluntary in nature. That means that you can move them by yourself, thinking about it. Smooth muscles, in contrast, are involuntary. So these are the type of muscles that line your organs and your digestive system, where they take over and you don't have to start thinking about, gosh, what's my stomach going to do? How's it going to contract? It's also found in skin. So it also lines the wall of blood vessels. So blood vessels, as you know, can relax and open, dilate, and also contract, get close or close up. And so you will see the effects of smooth muscles maybe on your face. You can tell capillaries. When you run, you can actually see blood vessels actually dilate. They open up for thermoregulatory purposes. Okay. And the last is cardiac muscle. And cardiac muscle is special because not only is it involuntary, it has intercalated discs, which is basically a way for muscle cells to send a response so that contraction can occur within the organ. These are also striated, just like skeletal muscles, and they line the heart wall, the heart organ itself. Okay. Take a look also, we're going to talk about the shape of each of these muscle cells, starting with cardiac muscle. I'm going to go back just for a second. I'm going to show you a word, bifurcate, which is branching. And so as I go back, you can tell that cardiac cells have a branching, and they're attached to each other via those intercalated discs. They're found only in heart, involuntary, and have a single nucleus. They also appear striated. those. Skeletal muscle, mentioned before, is attached to bone. You have total voluntary control. They are long and cylindrical. They have striations, and they often have many nuclei. Because skeletal muscle have high metabolic needs, you'll end up with cells that need a lot of information going on at once. So several nuclei will take care of all that information and ATP making and all that good stuff. They do contract because nervous tissue, as it hits it to nervous impulse, the muscle contraction occurs. Lastly, smooth muscle. Smooth muscle is not striated. It has, again, a single nucleus, uninucleate, and so is cardiac. Spindle-shaped, involuntary, and lines all your digestive system, the organs, blood vessels, and also your urinary bladder. Last, we're going to talk about nervous tissue, which is 5.6. Nervous tissue will be referred to again during our nervous system unit, and it's found in the brain, the spinal cord, and all the nerves associated with those two in your body. So nervous tissue is special because it transmits signals. So it actually conducts nervous impulses throughout your body. And the special cells that do this are called neurons. Neurons have axons and dendrites. The shape of a neuron is really, really long. The cell body, generally speaking. And it has a very, very long axon. And dendrites are the places where the nerve impulse is transmitted. So if another nerve cell, another neuron, is talking to another neuron, if one neuron is talking to another neuron, what you end up having is a transmission of the impulse go down from the dendrites to the axon, down the axon, and then that impulse jumps basically an opening and moves on to the next set of dendrites in the next neuron, and so on and so forth. So that electrical signal just keeps moving down. Supporting cells that help neurons do what they do are called neuroglia. And these not only support but nourish the neurons and give them structure. You can take a look at the neuron right here. Doesn't look exactly like I drew it, but neuroglia are all over the place, just in the background hanging out. Lastly, I wanted to close up with a nervous tissue, and this is actually taken from spinal cord. Take a look at the nerves, take a look at the neuroglia in the back. That's it for 5.3, 5.5, and 5.6.